Good afternoon. We are here live on Fijivillage.com and also on our Facebook platforms. I'm Vijay Narayan from Legend FM, VT FM, FM 96, Naftarang, Sargam News. And this is a special talkback with the man of the moment, Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, Minister Jone Usamate. Of course, we have a state of natural disaster declared after severe tropical cyclone Harold. We also have a state of natural disaster also declared in relation to COVID-19, as the Prime Minister announced yesterday. What does this mean for everyone, especially in relation to the people of Fiji who are staying in those state of natural disaster areas, and also how are relief efforts underway in different parts of the country where some people have been badly affected, some not so badly affected, and what can people do to assist? So, Mr. Usamate, on behalf of our listeners and also followers on Fijivillage.com, I would like to welcome you for this special talkback.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation.
Mr. Usamate, first of all, we know that severe tropical cyclone Harold caused a lot of devastation in different parts of the country, while majority of the people of Fiji were spared, we may say, from the wrath of Cyclone Harold. For others, the story was not so sweet. There are stories of devastation, people losing almost everything. The whole house has been blown away, and people are still living in evacuation centers or with other families. Mr. Usamate, we know that initial damage assessments are underway. You have people on the ground. Maybe to start off with, how many homes have been destroyed or badly damaged after Cyclone Harold?
Okay, well, the initial damage assessments were done by people on the ground. So people in the north, they did theirs, and in the Central Division, whoever there was there did it, and in the Western and in the Eastern. So all the initial damage assessments have been done, and now we're in the phase of the detailed damage assessments. And the teams that we have now, they'll go back and verify what and the teams that we're sending out now, they include technical people. They include engineers, they include construction people, they include some RFMF engineers, so they have a better appreciation of structural issues and structural under damage. So there were some initial estimates given by the initial damage assessment. Now they're undertaking the detailed damage assessment, so we should get a better set of figures. But there are some rough indications. At the moment, I think from the figures that we have, about 2,051 from the initial figures. These are yet to be fully, I think after all of our teams come back from Lao and from Kandavu and from Yasawa and Mamanudha and from Vatulele and Benga and Nanuda, when these teams come back, we'll be able to come up with the final figures. But at the moment, slightly over 2,000 homes are seen to be either damaged or destroyed. Around more than 500 destroyed, and around 1,528 in the initial assessments are seen to be partially damaged. So those are the initial figures. We'll have to wait for the teams to come back. When they do come back and they send the data, teams that are in the islands now, they're sending their data back every day. So we have teams that are sitting here in NDMO verifying this and trying to put together the total picture of what the total damage is in terms of the homes, in terms of the government facilities, the schools, the health centers. Quite a number of health centers have been affected also, and estimates on bridges, crossings, roads, and also the agriculture, in terms of the impact on agriculture. So there are the figures that I have here before me are the initial ones for the homes. And I know they're still compiling the total list for schools and so forth.
Definitely, even if the rough estimations, and we will get a clearer picture after your technical team gets back from those outer islands and other areas that have been affected. What type of assistance is being planned for these people? I know the immediate assistance is you've got the ships that went out with emergency supplies. What is the phased sort of relief efforts underway?
Well, that is the first phase. The first phase is as people are in evacuation centers, within the first 48 hours they'll be feeding themselves, and then after that this next wave tries to stabilize them, the first phase. tries to give them additional food to keep them going, tries to address the immediate health issues that they have, trauma, injury, maybe a bit of the psychosocial thing that they may face. They try to address that. They also look at basic infrastructure like water and for lighting, see what they can do immediately. And so they try to stabilize the people on the ground, make sure that they are fed, give some temporary assistance that they have for the shelters that they have. Some shelter kits have gone to the islands, but one of the main things that they need to do is get the full picture of what the damage is. The initial picture that we have so far is, we had a helicopter that went down to Kandavo, and we had that plane from New Zealand that came over Laos and came through over Kandavo, took some shots. But now they need to get a better understanding of the state of the damage. That all of that has to be compiled. When it's compiled and once it's studied, then we have to make a decision on what the next level of assistance will be, on what sort of things we will do in the next phase. That cannot be finalized until we get all that information back. There are some things that people will always need. Wash kits, water, sanitation, hygiene. There'll always be a need for tents and so forth. Those things we are getting ready anyway. But the real picture of the decision on exactly what kind of assistance will be given will only be finalized once we have the complete picture of what the damage is. So we will, at the moment, we are waiting for all of these teams to return. The information that they're getting is returned, and then all of that is put together, and then government will have to decide how it moves forward.
Minister Usamate, just in relation to food rations, we know that that is out now after the 48-hour period came to an end, that people start to get at least some food ration packs based on assessments. Your rations are what, monthly rations?
2 weeks. First phase is 2 weeks.
2-week rations, and then you will make further assessments by...
Yeah. So you give out 2 weeks rations, you make an assessment. There are some areas that you know that are really hit hard. Those ones might need rations for a longer period of time. And all of those sorts of assessments as to who will need the 2 weeks rations, who will need 4 weeks or 6 weeks or so forth, is done by these teams on the ground. Because when you talk to people, people saying things, it needs to be verified by people saying. They need to go and look at their TT and all of those things. So the teams coming back, they'll give us a better understanding what sort of rations we need to provide. They've gone out with 2 weeks rations. 2 weeks rations for the evacuation centers. As soon as the 2 days are over, they give them the rations for, I think, probably 1 or 2 weeks, I'm not too sure. But for those out in the islands that are severely thing, the first slot will be 2 weeks. And it'll depend on the assessment as to what sort of rations we provided to them.
I noticed in southern Laos, some of the areas they have issues with water. Of course, they're surrounded with water, and desalination plants would help. I know it's quite an expensive exercise. The question has been asked before during droughts to have desalination plants all ready to go so that seawater can be converted into fresh water. How much work is going into that area, or will we need to take emergency water supplies from the mainland?
Yeah, there is an assessment. I mean, water is an essential thing for life. In some islands, they have sources of water. You just have to fix up their water supply, the pipes and so forth. That's what's happening on Kandavo. Other places like Vatulele, the feedback that we got initially, they didn't have water. So that first trip had to take water with them. They had to take water. If there are other islands that don't have water, we will have to come up with the solutions. There is, I know, one portable desalination plant that is available probably in the west, something that we thought to get up for, what was it, TC Sarai? But eventually it was found that that was not a solution for that particular problem. So this is the importance of the assessment. They go and see what's available, and then they come back and determine what the best solution is. Is it to transport water, or is it to get a desalination plant? A portable desalination plant. That is also one of the things that we realized when we talked to our development partners. We had a meeting, was it 2 days ago? We had a meeting with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we talked to various governments, Australia, New Zealand, OCHA, ADRA, and JICA, and all of these. And so we had a list of things that we knew that we would need. Amongst those are portable desalination plants that need to be taken to some of the small islands. Desalination plants, most of them are based on fuel. You need somebody to be paying for the fuel. I know that there are some islands in Fiji that have desalination plants using solar energy, but when you have a desalination plant that is based on fuel, you can use it for the short time. After that, somebody will have to pay for that fuel. So they'll have to look at all of the different possible solutions to whatever problem that they have, whether it's water, in this particular case water, and we will have to address it. But we have also indicated to our development partners that portable desalination plants is something that we're interested in getting.
Definitely, you're having a lot of discussions with donor agencies. People would want to know where they can assist some of the areas you already identified in relation to housing assistance for those who have lost everything. Is there something that's been mapped out for them?
We always have the Prime Minister's what is it, a relief trust. That was the source of money that we used for the initial rollout. I think there are, for organizations that wish to contribute direct funding, that can always be a place that they can put that money into, whether it's going to be used for housing and so forth. Specific assistance for housing and what it will entail and what form it will take and how will we receive assistance that people want to provide is something that has yet to be formalized at the moment. Exactly what the form it's going to take.
Minister Usamate, also the issue in relation to damage to infrastructure. Of course, as Minister for Infrastructure, you would be concerned about any damage to infrastructure in any form, because it takes a lot of tax dollars to get infrastructure up and running in different parts of the country, and try to stretch the dollar as far as you can. In relation to water infrastructure, we know that there's concerns being raised in relation to some places badly affected and other places not so badly affected. What is the assessment so far as water infrastructure is concerned?
I think the good thing with the water, I think from the report that was given by Water Authority this morning, water has been re-established in basically all of the centers around Fiji. There were some concerns with some areas, but they've been able to gradually get that back online. There were some things with electricity. We still have some issues now with Singatoka and with Korolevu, and a bit of Rakaraki and a bit more in the small towns in the west. But to a large degree, those things have been assessed. But every time you have a cyclone, like electricity poles, they fall over. Dams, sometimes they get blocked. You have to spend additional money on all of these things. So it does incur a lot of cost. TC Sarai incurred around $10 million for us. Already for this one's washout in roads. We still have issues now with the jetties at Vivia. Moala jetties, every time there's a cyclone, something happens to it. We're thinking now that's probably in the wrong place. We need to move that. So the money that we have, things like Waianitu, which is up here near Nakabo, that particular crossing was destroyed by Tropical Cyclone Sarai. We're still in the process of fixing it up. All of a sudden this one comes, takes it again. So there's a lot of money that goes into these things, and it's something that every time that we have to move money out of existing projects to go and rehabilitate things that are taken out of because of cyclones, it means that other projects get affected. So in our continual planning is to make whatever infrastructure we put in more resilient. More resilient means more cost. But when you put in a lot of money into less projects at more cost, it's going to impact your ability to address all the needs that you have in the country. So it's a fine balancing act all the time, whether you spend less money on a few projects or more money on less projects, less money on more projects. So, but I think in the long term, knowing that all of these things are going to get more severe over time because of climate change, because of sea level rise, one of our focus now is to try to put in more climate resilient infrastructure as part of our disaster risk reduction policy, which the Prime Minister had launched in December of last year.
A question also on water. Supply has been disrupted as far as when power cuts off, water goes off, and back in 2012 it was highlighted. We used to have the issue all the time. and then generators had come in and say it is a thing of the past now that some of the main water supply systems in Fiji will not be disrupted when power goes off because standby generators had come in. Now it is being stated that the generators they have at the moment do not have the capacity to handle the load of the pumping station or the treatment plant. And I think some work is going on in that area to enhance its capacity so that it's you can shed some light on that.
Well, for me as minister, I always want to make the most important thing that people need to get water quickly back as quickly as possible. If one of the big chunks of expenditure in Water Authority of Fiji is cost of electricity, because there's a lot of money that is needed to pump water up. What is down there needs to be pumped up to stations and sent all over the place. And when you don't have power, that is obviously going to impact. So for me personally at home, whenever there's a cyclone coming, we stock up water. We do it automatically. And Water Authority also gives that message out. This is also part of resilient behavior. If you know the cyclone is going to happen, you stock up water. Don't think that it's going to not cut off. I think it's just, this is the advice that they give us. I follow that advice. Cyclone coming, I stock up water. Just as I get ready my alternative forms of energy. You just need to be ready. So one of the things for all of us is to have more resilient practices that we have, all of us. But at the same time, for the water, a big issue for them has been power. And we've told them from the last cyclones to make sure that they have standby power generators. And the other problem they always have, the turbidity in the water and the intakes from the streams. You know, having to have divers go down and clear that out. So it's not only the power, sometimes it's the volume of water coming into the intakes because it's blocked because of all the debris that comes through. But as Minister, we've been talking to Water Authority to make sure that as much as possible, where they do rely on the EFL for power, they need to have standby staff. That's a
I noticed they've put a tender out to get generators.
Over the past few years, they've been putting in generators. I mean, after Winston, they put some in. Prior to Sarai, they did some. So they continually been doing that. But they always, you always have to balance this. If I'm going to use all my money on generators, then I have all of these other multitude projects that I have. So which one do I give up here to do this? It's always a fine balancing act. It's not as if they have a big pot of gold that they can always dip into. So in any of these utilities, which you're talking about the EFL, whether you're talking about Fiji Roads Authority, it's always a matter of trying to balance what they need to do given the amount of resources that they have. Should I set more of my money aside just in case a cyclone comes, or should I still put more money into addressing all of these projects that I have all around the country?
Now, in relation to, of course, the generator work is going on, there was another issue, I think, in relation to the turbidity levels of the water, definitely with the increased water flow that presents a lot of situations for WEF. One of the issues is whether, and it's been suggested that work will be done in this area about having barriers or gates so that it stops the big debris from coming in. Is work started in that area? Or?
I'll have to ask Water Authority about that. I haven't talked to them about those kinds of specific issues. But I think for a lot of these things about debris, you've got to go right back to source. And a lot of source of that is agricultural practices, indiscriminate deforestation, because all of these things, as you cut more and more forests, your agricultural practices are such that it does not stop the sediments getting into the land. Things does not diminish the impact of rainfall and its impact on the land itself. All of these things have to be addressed. You have to go back to all of these things because they are also the source of this. So it's not just about putting in, just the gates in front of the intakes. You also have to address all of those issues that is impacting on where the water is coming in.
Mindsets have to change.
Mindsets, I think, they.
Is it
when we're talking to climate change, we talk about this ridge to reef concept. So when you're looking at that, you can't just look at just what Water Authority does. It's all that ridge to reef. Everything that's happening there is going to impact on this. That's why we have one of the reasons we have more floods now. There's a lot of cutting of trees and water just comes in, it gets saturated, and things get flooded very quickly. We are also building houses on places that are floodplains. Those things are supposed to be floodplains. People are building homes there, they're always going to get flooded. Because when water is something you can't stop. If it comes in, if it normally flows in this particular way and you put a barrier there, you'll find another way to get
You
there.
know, you stay in the Nasinu, Nosori area. There's some places that flood regularly, but people still want to stay
They
there.
still build. When
They
you
want
look
to
at that
move there.
place, it's supposed to be a floodplain. People should not be living there, but they do live there.
But there's no other option for them.
Well, maybe they might. See, this is one of the things. When we came up with the disaster risk reduction policy, it means there's all kinds of things that come out of this. More resilient agriculture. Build your roads in a way, in places that are less likely to be flooded. Have planning for your country about what you should put where. Where should you put housing? Should you put it in a place that's going to be a floodplain? Maybe not. So all of that kind of planning is also part of this disaster risk reduction. It's a more long-term planning to make sure that we
One of the
reduce
assessments always
risk.
made is it's only a disaster when it affects the human beings. If the human being does not build in a place where they will put themselves into danger, then they are out of disaster. So what is the government doing on
I
that?
don't understand what you're saying.
Well, if it's they are away from the floodplain, so to speak, they're away from that area that is definitely affected by rising floodwaters. So what can be done to make sure that they move away from some of these flood-prone areas?
I think it will require some rules in terms of urban or semi-urban planning, what is allowed in different areas. It's the same thing for people. Is when the problem happens that people do. I give an example of this COVID-19. You talk about social distancing. People don't social distance because they don't associate what they do or what they do not do with the immediate danger because they can't see the danger. It's when you see the danger. If somebody falls sick in your family or around you, then you start social distancing. By that time, it's too late, or you don't hand wash. People are given advice what to do. This is just nature, I think. People are given advice on something to do or not to do. They don't do it because they don't associate what they do with an immediate problem that's going to happen. When that problem does happen, then they start doing it, but then it's too late. So
Or if
this
not,
is-
it's
this is a-
someone else's problem.
It's someone else's problem. But someone else's problem is our problem because we live in the same place. So it's not just with disaster or with cyclones. It's with virtually everything. Getting people to realize NCDs. You eat the right food, you drink the wrong thing, you put the wrong gas in your stomach. You're going to get sick, but you don't do it until you are stage 4 or about to go, and then all of a sudden you want to change. By that time, it's human nature. So we just have to. It's about mindset change. I mean, you can see the thing with disasters before. When we used to plan for disasters, this is what we used to say. When the cyclone happens, this is what we'll do. We're going to do this. But that's too late. The cyclone has already happened. So a lot of our planning now has to be before the cyclone happens, and even before that. This is where our disaster risk reduction policy comes. Cyclones. What are the things that cause cyclones? What are the things that cause a lot of flooding? What is causing that? And then puts in policies for different government agencies to do things that reduce the risk from those things happening. So that's one of the focuses that we do. That's why our Prime Minister goes and fights on the global stage about climate change. Because no matter what we do in Fiji, if the greenhouse gas emissions in the large countries doesn't happen, we're still going to be swamped with all of these things that is happening here. That's what we need to do. We need to plan ahead. Even though we're a small country, we need to do it more and more and more and get the whole world behind us. And at the same time, manage the problems that we have
You
here.
talked about mindset change. Do you think that we are shifting away from
I
sort
think there's a greater awareness, but whether that awareness is leading to a change in behavior, sometimes it leads to change in behavior for some time, but then I don't know, maybe in some cases the change in behavior continues, others it doesn't. You see what happened when this COVID-19 thing first came up. I keep talking about COVID-19 because my mind was fully into COVID-19 before
we
I
all
had
have to be into
Yeah.
COVID-19, yeah.
One of the things that was coming through when we were putting out the messages on COVID-19, wash your hands, keep your distance between people. People knew it, but they didn't do it. Knew it, they didn't do it. So then we had to get teams from all of the divisions to go out and meet communities and talk and explain to them. But then it was head knowledge. Whether that head knowledge changed behavior, That's another question. That's a challenge for us. The things that people know to get it for to change their behavior. To do that, I think it becomes an issue of changing values and norms. What's acceptable, what is not acceptable. It was interesting that as we're doing this curfews and all this, people start calling, hey, I've got some people in my neighborhood who are socializing. And there are more than 20 of them, and they are sitting close to that. They are sitting, they're breaking those norms for COVID-19. That showed that some of that message was getting
It's
to
about
people.
accountability.
Yes, accountability, and they began to express a concern with what others were doing. But sometimes it's easy for us to talk about it when others are doing it. When we are doing it, that's another question. But I think it's values and norms and changing those things that people know into behavioral change. That's going to be our challenge, and we will continue to have to work on this.
Now, in relation to assistance, of course, government cannot do everything, and as you said, you're meeting with donor agencies, even businesses. If people are interested in assisting government in certain areas after TC Herald, what are some of the areas you'd like helping?
Oh, well, it was interesting. Was it yesterday? Yesterday I met with Total. They came and donated $2,000 worth of kerosene. Interesting. Was it Kasabias? Kasabias donated 5,000 stoves. So one of these companies, Value City, I believe, they donated clothing. So various companies know what they can donate, and they give. There are companies now that are helping. We have these fever clinics going for COVID-19. There are companies that are donating food for these things. People know what they have; they can provide it. We can make sure that we can get that that assistance to whoever needs it. People can get in touch with NDMO, with the National Disaster Management Organization, with the director for NDMO, and we can channel it if they.
So anybody who wants to come forward and give anything, different groups, NDMO is the place to
come to the
contact?
NDMO. A lot of if you are in the divisions, for instance, if you're in the Western Division, if you're in the Eastern, we work through the commissioners. NDMO sits here nationally, but our engine rooms in the division are the commissioners. Commissioner Western, he does the operations. He's the operational arm of NDMO in the divisions. Commissioner Eastern, they do it. They can contact the commissioners and we'll coordinate. One of the things that happened in the past, if you have this whole area that needed rations, sometimes the rations were only going to one part. People come, they drop the food there, while this lot here didn't have it.
Just
When
on
you
the
work
roadside.
with the commission, with the commission, they know who's getting the rations. So the next time when you come in, they say, please don't take it there, take it to that lot, because they need it. That's what you want to do. When you coordinate it through the commissions and the district offices, we make sure that it gets to where it's needed. So we encourage people, if you have some assistance, please talk to the commission, or if you want to do it with us here in Suva, you can talk to us at the NDMO.
There you go. That is a very important point, because people, out of the goodness of their heart, you may be wanting to do the right thing,
True.
but you may be giving out ration packs maybe to homes that have already received the ration packs 5 times before that. And of course, for some people, they will just take the packs, but to have a coordinated approach, as Minister Usamate said, go through the NDMO and the commissioner's offices, and they will then coordinate it accordingly. Now, Minister Usamate, just in relation to what is being done in the areas declared a state of natural disaster after TC Herald, of course we have even areas like Nakasi, Narere, they have been declared. They are on to Tailevu and other areas, then to the outer islands that have been declared as a state of natural disaster areas. What does this mean for the people? Of course, then the Permanent Secretary and your ministry has the powers to coordinate all the resources around it, just to give a bit more understanding to people what's happening.
Okay, when you have a state of natural disaster, what you're basically saying, in these specific areas, the disaster has been quite extensive. So these particular areas require a lot of assistance, and those areas have been named for this state of natural disaster. And under the National Disaster Management Act, it then gives a lot of powers to my Permanent Secretary. My Permanent Secretary for my ministry becomes a national controller for disasters. When national disaster is called, that national controller, he has the power to pull in any assets from government. If he thinks, okay, we need 20 water pumps, and he knows there are 5 water pumps here and there are 10 in Water Authority and 10 in the Republic of Fiji Military Forces. As controller, because it's a natural disaster, he can go and get those resources and make sure they are used in the areas where we have extreme disaster. At the same time, if he realizes, okay, I've got this natural disaster, I've got a lot of things I need to do, I need to pull out the best people from all the government agencies to come and address particular issues. For instance, planning. Who are the best planners? He pulls those people out of there, means he has the power to pull resources from other government ministries and concentrate them so that they can focus on that particular problem. This is the power that he has at the moment. Also, if there are some assets in the country that is not under the control of government, he can say, okay, company X, I need this particular ship, I'm going to take it, we're going to compensate you, but we need this ship to do this particular job at this moment. So it allows us to concentrate forces to address specific issues for those specific areas where we have the greatest amount of disaster, greatest amount of problem. At the same time too, there are some agencies offshore. When you declare a state of natural disaster, you have access to some of the assistance they provide. So it leads us to another level of operation. You see, when we had Sarai and Tino, we did not declare state of natural disaster. We just dealt with it through our own operation. But when the scale becomes slightly bigger, we do this so we can concentrate our forces. We can call upon the best that we have in government. We can call upon all the equipment, whatever we have in government, to throw it at that particular problem.
Minister, in relation to schools, as you said, assessments are underway. I mean, Bhavani Dayal Arya College badly damaged, one of their classroom blocks, a double-story structure. Also, Tailebu North College suffered damage. QVS assessments coming back is not as major as people were saying. It's quite minor according to some officials, and an initial number that's given is about 60 schools maybe in total suffer some kind of damages. If you can shed some light on it. Of course, Education Ministry now, at least until 16th June, there will be no classes for students in schools. But what is the assessment as far as school damage is concerned?
I must admit, I have not seen the full assessment of the damage in schools, but I think once the list is in, we'll have to sit down with the Ministry of Education and also with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Economy, and we will need to come up with some solution to see which schools are immediately reusable, the ones that can be fixed up, and then there's others that have more extensive damage or have been destroyed, but have to come up with some solutions. At this point, I don't have that full set of information, but it will need to be done. We have extended the school holidays because of COVID-19. In fact, I had already started telling commissioners, you better start places where you have evacuation centers in schools, you better start cleaning them up, try to get people out so school can start. But now, because of COVID-19, the schools are still out. So we'll have to focus on seeing what we can do about fixing the schools. But at the moment, I don't have any definitive plans or courses of action. But it is part of our next phase, once we have the detailed damage assessment and working out ways in which we can address those issues.
As far as your next phase is concerned, of course, you've got your ration packs out, you've got the emergency supply out, you have counsellors on the ground, of course, that is very important. The next phase of making further assessments and getting those detailed reports back, by when will you have a definitive sort of...
Okay. We are now currently in the initial response, the response phase. The problem has happened, just respond to it. Respond, collect the information, see what the problem is, identify the solution. Then we will start the recovery. In the recovery, there will be things in recovery that we can do immediately. Might be classrooms we can build, other things that we can fix up, those that we will do immediately. There are others that are going to take a bit more time. So then there'll have to be plans done on what can be done immediately, what can be done over a slightly longer period. Then look at the resources that are needed for that, whether we can have them here or we need to source them from other places. For instance, Japan had offered, I think there's, I can't remember the amount of money it is that Japan had given us for natural disasters, for loans at a very low interest rate. Some of that money can be used for these sorts of things. But we'll have to look at the whole, what is the whole level of damage, and then break it out in terms of recovery and the rehabilitation phase. That should all start coming together by the time these teams come back to Suba. They're sending us information now, we're compiling, detailed damage assessment, and from that we'll be developing the plans for moving forward in all the various sectors: infrastructure, education, agriculture, and so forth.
I noticed you had the first case of leptospirosis confirmed in Kandavu.
Oh, there's been a number of cases of leptospirosis, not only in Kandavu, it's in the north, in other places. This one came about, it got highlighted, one death in fact in Kandavu, and a few other leptospirosis cases, because this is something we were always concerned about after cyclone. They call LTDD, leptospirosis, typhoid, dengue, and diarrhea, I think. So in Kandavu we had one fatality, lepto, and another case that I think had to be medevaced to Sue, and two other cases. But also now around Fiji you also have other lepto cases in other places. There's been some typhoid cases and some dengue cases on Vonolem. But the ones that we are aware of in Kandavu that might be associated with, leptospirosis, I think is associated with dirty water. All of that came. But when that was known, the ship that was in Kavala had to quickly come down to Wunisia, offload the equipment, and get our health inspectors to take some quick action to make sure that that thing was dealt with. And then the ship went back up to Kavala to continue with the ration distribution. So at the moment, the stats that we were given by the health today in terms of LTDD, it's not abnormal. The volume that we have in Fiji is not above the normal averages of what they have at this particular point in time. But the Minister for Health has talked about this. He wants to eliminate all of that. So eliminate LTDD. So that's a big challenge for his ministry to go out there, because these things happen because of poor water, poor sanitation, or mosquitoes. So you don't kill the mosquitoes, you're going to get Zika, you're going to get dengue, and all of these diseases. So it's about going after the vectors, going after sanitation, going after making sure that people have clean water.
This issue, just because you've been heavily involved in the COVID-19 preparedness phase, and also going out with the health minister and the prime minister and the minister for defense, visiting a number of areas. In relation to, of course, we are talking to people about the changing of mindset, the people continuing to have grog sessions, have alcohol, and majority of the cases now that people are getting charged with, they are breaching the social gathering rules. What is your message to the people out there that be watching this on our website, Fijivillage, on our Facebook, and also on our radio stations?
Well, I think my message, there are some countries in the world that we really admired about the way they dealt with COVID-19. I mean, South Korea is an example, others like Singapore. But even amongst these countries, in some of them, their numbers went up, went down, and in some cases went up again, went down, went up again, went down. Why does it go up and down? Because we don't really stick by these basic rules: social distance, social distance, social distance, hand washing, making sure that even not sharing the same below and all of that, not eating for this. If we want to make sure that we can stop the spread of COVID, we have 17 cases now. If we stamp down very strong, all of us, community leaders, all of us, in our own families, in the workplace, we have to stamp down and make sure this social distancing works. Because people are not going to get this disease. It comes from coughing, and those droplets, then you touch it and you touch your face. If we just step down on the social distancing, hand washing, not sharing the same bill, all of that, we can kill it. That's the only vaccine that we can do. Because Fiji is in a kind of a situation where if we had a lot of cases and we have only 50 or 100 intensive care unit beds, we would not be able to stop it. The only way we can stop it is by getting everybody following. These rules are brought by the best minds that we have. The best minds all over the world in terms of health, the best minds that we have in Fiji, up at the Ministry of Health. They've got a think tank panel that looks at what is being learned from all around the world, because even in the world, what COVID has done seems to be changing. I'm fascinated.
Even the 28 days quarantine is changed from 14.
Who knows? So it's because we're dealing with something new. So it's rapidly evolving, and people are still learning about it. And the thing with the citizens of the country, whatever advice is being given out is based on what we understand at the particular point in time. what the best minds on this particular issue are telling us to do, and it's up to us to do. If we do it, we can save ourselves. If we do it, we could no longer have these curfews and lockdown, people not able to go to the islands. Today, one of my cousins came from Kadabu. She was given birth 2 weeks ago. She said, I want to go back. I said, you can't go. She said, why? Because we want to make sure that we don't introduce COVID into Kadabu. Because if it gets there, God forbid, we don't have the other kind of resources that we have here. We have to contain it. We have to lock it down as much as possible. Lock it down where it is. That's why we have these fever clinics going. That's why we are isolating some small areas like Nambua Settlement and Sosoa and Wunivangi in Riketi. I try to keep it there. People coming off the planes, we keep them in the hotels. If it's COVID there, we want to keep it there. Make sure it doesn't go out. You look at some of the clusters that we have, one person had it, never spread. That's what we want. One person have it, never spread. Once it
Contain
spreads,
and isolate.
yeah, contain, isolate, kill it. And if that, maybe we can get back to our normal business. We can get I think if we want to get back to normality, every good thing in life requires a price. You sacrifice to improve. Sacrifice a bit of what you like for the benefit of your family, benefit of the nation as a whole. I think that would be my message to everybody.
There are people going out and breaking the rules. Do you think they just do not want to follow the rules, or they do not get it?
I think here they get it. You know, this is what I keep thinking, that knowledge to translate into behavior. Maybe that knowledge is not translated into value in terms of what's important. At a particular point in time, that knowledge is not more important to me than something else that I want. It's a system of values about what's important, and not on the basis of what you value at a particular point in time. That's how you make a decision. So how can we make people value this more? I think that's the challenge for us.
And it makes it hard for some people because it's an invisible threat.
I mean, same, like I say, NCT. NCT is basic thing. Eat the right food, you won't get it. Or at least you reduce your chances of getting it. You put the wrong thing in your mouth, you won't get it. You don't smoke, you drink. No, man, I'm a reformed smoker. So I know all that, because you don't see it. NCTs, if somebody gets diabetes today, that means it started 20 years ago. That's what I learned when I was Minister of Health. It started a long, long time ago. So by the time you try to change your behavior, it's too late, because you don't see the end result of your actions. Sometimes you cannot see the linkage between what you do and what you do not do and the consequence. That linkage is weak because it happens over a considerable point in time. Or for this COVID, it's weak maybe because it's invisible. Maybe if COVID-19 was not a small little virus, but some guy who wants to punch you, you can see him there, then you'll be afraid of him. Because it's something minute, it's almost invisible. You don't see it as a real threat.
Mr. Usamate, just finally before we finish off, we know that definitely mammoth task in trying to make sure that the affected communities need the much needed assistance, and of course it cannot be done just by one agency or one individual. It needs the team effort. It needs the effort of the people of Fiji too, in relation to TC Herald, that we get back on our feet as a resilient nation as we are, and also in relation to COVID-19. Your final comments on the two situations that are being dealt with, and with the whole of a government approach with all the other agencies at play here. Your comments?
Well, I think we are a resilient country. We've shown it in the past. We said we were stronger than Winston. We went through it. We have stores of resiliency in us. We have got good leadership. We've got a strong Prime Minister, decisive leadership, person that's led from the front. We need the government leadership, but we need everybody on board. Disasters and all of these things, they need to be everybody's business. We need to change the things that we know in our heads as knowledge for it to be converted to become your values. And I think for anybody in any sort of a leadership situation in Fiji, it must be part of their leadership role to do what they can to make that knowledge of COVID and all of these things, to make sure that it translates into behavior. First, behavior in us ourselves, and then behavior in those that we have influence in our family, and then try to take that to the community, change the behavior of the community. It's just a few people taking a little action can become a catalyst for a great movement amongst a lot of people. One of the things that a lot of us have is that, oh, I know that, but why should I try to do anything when those guys are not going to do anything about it? Why should I be the one? That's what we need to do. all of us need to know that I can do something to make a change in my own life that is going to have an impact on the people around me and in my family and in my community. And if all of us begin to have that sort of approach, we will eventually defeat all of these things. We will get out of the effects of Harold. We will get over COVID-19. But the faster we can work together, we can do it faster, and that's for the benefit of everybody.
That's Minister Jone Usamate, of course. He's in between meetings. We're grateful to have a bit of his time to address this issue on our platforms, and also you can catch maybe an update after the next phase comes through as far as TC Herald is concerned. Also, the message is loud and clear in relation to if you want to support, give your helping hand in relation to TC Herald and the victims of TC Herald. You can contact the National Disaster Management Office or the commissioners in different divisions, Commissioner Northern, Commissioner Western, Commissioner Eastern and Commissioner Central's office. And of course then it can be a good coordinated approach where people who are the worst of the worst affected can get a helping hand from you as a fellow citizen. Minister Usamate, thank you very much for your time. You have a good afternoon.
Naga, thank you. All right, back to